to bring the Americans, our friends, to help us against the atheists, he said the communists. Isn't it ironic?
In other words, he came to thank you for helping bring America to help him. And now he may be responsible for bombing America.
Absolutely.
What did you make of him when you met him?
I was not impressed, to be honest with you.
Not impressed?
No, I thought he was simple and very quiet guy.
A simple and quiet guy whose family just happened to have a business relationship with the family of George W. Bush. Is that what he was thinking about? Because if the public knew this, it wouldn't look very good. Was he thinking, you know, I need a big black marker? In early 2004, in a speech during the New Hampshire primary, I called George W. Bush a deserter from his time in the Texas Air National Guard. In response, the White House released his military records in the hopes of disproving the charge. What Bush didn't know is that I already had a copy of his military records, uncensored, obtained in the year 2000. And there is one glaring difference between the records released in 2000 and those he released in 2004. A name had been blacked out. In 1972, 2 airmen were suspended for failing to take their medical examination. One was George W. Bush, and the other was James R. Bath. In 2000, the documents show both names. But in 2004, Bush and the White House had Bath's name blacked out. Why didn't Bush want the press and the public to see Bath's name on his military records? Perhaps he was worried that the American people would find out that at one time James R. Bath was the Texas money manager for the Bin Ladens. Bush and Bath had become good friends when they both served in the Texas Air National Guard. After they were discharged, when Bush's dad was head of the CIA, Bath opened up his own aviation business after selling a plane to a man by the name of Salam bin Laden, heir to the second largest fortune in Saudi Arabia, the Saudi bin Laden Group.
W at that time was just starting off in the world as a businessman. Because he's a guy who's always tried to emulate his father, he decided to go into the oil business. He founded an oil company, a drilling company out in West Texas called Arbusto, which was very, very good at drilling dry holes that nothing came out of. But the question has always been, where did this money come from? Now his dad was rich. His dad could have done this for him, but his dad didn't do this for him. There's no indication that Daddy wrote a check to start him off in this company.
So where did George W. Bush get his money?
I'm George Bush.
One person who did invest in him was James R. Bath. Bush's good friend, James Bath, was hired by the bin Laden family to manage their money in Texas and invest in businesses. And James Bath himself, in turn, invested in George W. Bush. Bush ran Arbusto into the ground, as he did every other company he was involved in, until finally one of his companies was bought by Harken Energy, and they gave him a seat on their board.
A lot of us have suspected through the years that there has been Saudi oil money involved in all of these companies. Harken, Spectrum 7, Arbusto Drilling, all of the Bush companies, whenever they got into trouble, there were these angel investors who flowed money into the companies.
So the question is, why would Saudis, who had all the oil in the world, go around the globe to invest in this lousy oil company? And the thing is, it had one big asset. Harken had one thing going for it, which is that George W. Bush was on its board of directors at a time when his father was president of the United States.
When you're the president's son and you've got unlimited access combined with some credentials from a prior campaign, in Washington, D.C., people tend to respect that. I mean, access is power. And I can find my dad and talk to him any time of the day.
Yes, it helps to be the president's son. especially when you're being investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission.
In 1990, when Mr. Bush was a director of Harken Energy, he received this memo from company lawyers warning directors not to sell stock if they had unfavorable information about the company. 1 week later, he sold $848,000 worth of Harken stock. 2 months later, Harken announced losses of more than $23 million.
The James Baker law partner who helped Bush beat the rap from the SEC was a man by the name of Robert Jordan, who, when George W. became president, was appointed ambassador to Saudi Arabia. After the Harken debacle, the friends of Bush's dad got him a seat on another board of a company owned by the Carlyle Group.
We wanted to look at which companies actually gained from September 11th. Turned up this company, Carlyle Group. The Carlyle Group is a multinational conglomerate that invests in heavily government-regulated industries like telecommunications, healthcare, and particularly defense. Both George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush worked for the Carlyle Group, the same company that counted the bin Laden family among its investors. Carlyle Group was holding its annual investor conference on the morning of September 11th in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Washington, D.C. At that meeting were all of the Carlyle regulars. James Baker, likely John Major, definitely George H.W. Bush, though he left the morning of September 11th. Shafiq bin Laden, who is Osama bin Laden's half-brother, and was in town to look after his family's investments in the Carlyle Group. All of them together in one room watching as the planes hit the towers, and that in fact the bin Laden family was invested in one of their defense funds, which ironically meant that as the United States started increasing its defense spending, the bin Laden family stood to gain from those investments through the Carlyle Group.
Our Commander-in-Chief, President George W. Bush.
With all the weapons companies it owned, the Carlyle Group was, in essence, the 11th largest defense contractor in the United States.
Thanks a lot.
It owned United Defense, makers of the Bradley Armored Fighting Vehicle. September 11th guaranteed that United Defense was going to have a very good year. Just 6 weeks after 9/11, Carlyle filed to take United Defense public, and in December made a one-day profit of $237 million. But sadly, with so much attention focused on the bin Laden family being important Carlyle investors, the bin Ladens eventually had to withdraw. Bush's dad, though, stayed on as senior advisor to Carlyle's Asia board for another 2 years.
As unseemly as it seems to know that George H.W. Bush was meeting with the bin Laden family while Osama was a wanted terrorist, well before September 11th. It's very discomforting for Americans to know that. George H.W. Bush is a man who has obviously incredible reach into the White House. He receives daily CIA briefings, which is the right of any ex-president, but very few ex-presidents actually exercise that right. He does. And I think in a very real way, they are benefiting from the confusion that arises when George H.W. Bush visits Saudi Arabia on behalf of Carlyle and meets with the royal family and meets with the bin Laden family. Is he representing the United States of America, or is he representing an investment firm in the United States of America, or is he representing both? This company is about money. It's not about conspiracies to run the world or engineer political maneuvering and things like that. It's about making money, and it's about making a lot of money, and they've done very well.
I can get you on the record on this question. In the White House view, there's no ethical conflict in former President Bush and former Secretary of State Jim Baker using their contacts with world leaders to represent one of the most well-known military arms dealers, the Carlyle Group.
The President has full faith that his family will conform with all proper ethics laws, and will act properly in their conduct.
Okay, so let's say one group of people, like the American people, pay you $400,000 a year to be President of the United States. But then another group of people invest in you, your friends, and their related businesses $1.4 billion over a number of years. Who are you going to like? Who's your daddy? Because that's how much the Saudi royals and their associates have given the Bush family, their friends,
How are you, sir?
and their related businesses in the past 3 decades.
Seems like a very nice reunion with friends.
Is it rude to suggest that when the Bush family wakes up in the morning, they might be thinking about what's best for the Saudis instead of what's best for you or me?
Yes, know each other.
Because $1.4 billion just doesn't buy a lot of flights out of the country. It buys a lot of love. Sooner or later, this special relationship with a regime that Amnesty International condemns as a widespread human rights violator would come back to haunt the Bushes. Now, after 9/11, it was an embarrassment, and they preferred that no one ask any questions.
The investigation should have begun on September 12th. There's no reason why it shouldn't have. 3,000 people were dead. It was a murder, and it should have gotten started immediately.
First, Bush tried to stop Congress from setting up its own 9/11 investigation.
It's important for us to not reveal how we collect information. That's what the enemy wants. And we're fighting an enemy.
When he couldn't stop Congress, he then tried to stop an independent 9/11 commission from being formed.
The president's position was a break from history. Independent investigations were launched within days of Pearl Harbor and President Kennedy's assassination.
But when Congress did complete its own investigation, the Bush White House censored 28 pages of the report.
The president is being pressed by all sides to declassify the report. U.S. officials tell NBC News most of the secret sources involve Saudi Arabia.
We have given extraordinary cooperation with Chairman Keane and Hamilton.
We haven't gotten the materials we needed, and we certainly haven't gotten them in a timely fashion. The deadlines we set have passed.
Will you testify before the commission?
This commission? You know, I don't testify. I mean, I'd be glad to visit with them.
What it will do is hold this in my heart and has been in my heart since September 11th. I lost my husband, 15 years. I'm now by myself. I need to know what happened to him. I know what I got back from the autopsy. That man was my life, and I have no plan. I was taking a class, and they asked me what was I going to do in the next 5 years. And if I'm not doing something with this, I don't know what reason I have to live. So it's very important. Very important. Okay.
Ignored by the Bush administration, more than 500 relatives of 9/11 victims filed suit against Saudi royals and others. The lawyers the Saudi defense minister hired to fight the 9/11 families? The law firm of Bush family confidant, James A. Baker.
So we're right here in the center of 3 important American landmarks, the Watergate Hotel and office building, the Kennedy Center over there, and the Embassy of Saudi Arabia. Yeah. How much money do the Saudis have invested in America, roughly?
I've heard figures as high as $860 billion.
$860 billion?
Billion.
That's a lot of money.
A lot, yeah.
And what percentage of our economy does that represent? I mean, it seems like a lot.
Well, in terms of investments on Wall Street, in American equities, it's roughly 6 or 7% of America. They own a fairly good slice of America.
Wow. Yeah.
And most of that money goes into the great blue chip companies.